Hello everyone, I'm Carly and Square the Dragons, I want a Woto!
And I'm Sam, a null who constantly has to remind herself, don't be lazy, Sam, deal with your shit.
And welcome to Read Receipts with Carly and Sam, our brand new book-based podcast covering all the latest hits and some stories off the beaten path.
With some fun and exclusive episodes mixed in between. Carly, can you believe that this is our first official podcast episode?
No. We're so excited to be here.
It has been so excited to be here.
So long since we finished this book, and we have just been sitting on all these thoughts. We were trying to not talk to each other about it, and
we needed to save it for the pod, and we still have so much more to say.
Yeah, don't worry. We can. I've never let go of a grudge, so I promise you I will still have the same conviction that I did the first time I already talked about things with Sam.
For sure. Just a reminder that because this is a book-based podcast, we are going to be talking pretty in-depth over the book that we're covering, including candid reviews, honest thoughts, plot summaries, things like that. So this is a spoiler warning for all of our listeners back home. You've been warned. Carly, do you want to remind everyone what book we're covering?
Yes. We are reading When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. And in case you had not read it yet before jumping into this podcast, let me read the back of the book for you. As an assassin for the rebellion group Fier Duoth, Rave's job is to complete orders and never get caught. When a rival bounty hunter turns her world upside down, blood spills, hearts break, and Rave finds herself imprisoned by the Guild of Nobles, a group of powerful fae who turn her into a political statement. Crushed by the loss of his great love, Khan Vager took the head of a king and donned his melted crown. Now on the tireless quest to quell the never-ebbing ache in his heart, a clue lures him into the captain's high-security prison, where he stumbles upon the imprisoned Rave. Echoes of the past race between them. There's more to their story than meets the eye, but some truths are too poisonous to swallow.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, if that sounds interesting to you, pause, read the book, and come back. If not, we're going to continue with our thoughts.
So, Carly gave us a quick back of the book summary. I also kind of thought that maybe we could remind everyone of some of the characters at play that we're working with. So, obviously, we have Rave slash Elowen.
They're the same person! Unbelievable.
We have Khan. We have Tyroth, Kaduk, and Vea. So, Khan's whole family. Kaisari, their daughter.
Their daughter, not Tyroth's.
All things we're going to be getting into. Kalis and the Creators. The Other. Rexaros.
Yes.
Sareem, Essie, the whole Fier Duoth. Slatra, Raigun, and all of the dragons.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of characters, actually.
Before we jump into some of the bigger details of the book, let's go ahead and start with a overarching book review. Sam, do you want to start? What did you think of the book?
I gave it a 3. So pretty in the middle. Honestly, I thought the world building was incredibly detailed. It was very unique, especially to the time and the space that we live in now. It really made me feel like this was a completely different world, you know? But I will also say on that note that a lot of the descriptions were so specific that sometimes I felt like they left a lot more questions than answers. I feel like when you create an entirely new world that's so different from this one, you really have to be careful with all of the new things that you're putting in there because so many little things can slip through the cracks. And so I feel like that happened with quite a few things in this book. And I think primarily that's why I gave it 3 stars over 4 or 5.
I started out.
You had a journey with.
I had a very much
reviewing this.
Anytime I finish a book, like as long as I like it, I'm like, yeah, I had a great time. And so I'm going to give it somewhere in the 4 to 5 range. So I did start out as a 4.5. And then I learned after a little bit thinking about all the sort of like loose end type things. We have all these little bits and pieces, and I just don't know how in depth when there's so many loose ends. Eventually, over time, I ended up at a 3.75. I think the last straw for me was that I just finished Onyx Storm, and it just did not seem fair to rank Onyx Storm somewhere in that 4 to 5 range and also have this ranked in the same range. So 3.75, because I still really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely interested in the story. I just feel like a little bit left in the, like, okay, where are we going from here?
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page about that, where we like enjoyed it and we're looking forward to reading, you know, the rest of the series. But there were definitely a lot more questions that we were left with at the end of the 700-page journey than I think we should have been left with.
Yeah. Well, from here, let's start getting into some of the details of the book. I think the number one thing is Rave and Elwyn being the same person.
Being the same person.
Yeah. Personally, I had no idea. I think I immediately ruled out, because I did have the thought, very early on in the book, Rave says something about some big word about, like, falling into the world. And so I thought, like, okay, it kind of sounds like she came from a moon. But obviously, I have no context for the world at this point. So
Sure.
I'm like, that's a throwaway idea.
But little did you know.
Little did I know I was right. Yeah.
Called it from the beginning.
Yeah, but from the diary entries that we got of Elwyn, you know, they're over 100 years back. So my theory at one point was that Elwyn was Khan's mom.
So interesting now knowing who she is.
I don't know if anyone else thought about this, but when they get to the hut scene, and Khan mentions that it's his mom's hut, and there's so many times where Ray acts like a little bit of a jerk to Khan. And for some reason, in this hut, she's very like, oh, I'm being a bad house guest in Khan's mom's home. And it's like, why do you care all of a sudden? I thought that was funny. And this was also around the same time that Khan mentioned that he knew Elwyn. So that's kind of where I drew that connection. And then very soon after that, of course, we find out that that is not the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really shocked. I did not see it coming, personally.
I think I had a feeling. I don't know how I had a feeling, but I think I had a feeling. Mm-hmm. Looking back on it, Rave's visions, she like seemed to have these moments where she was thinking about a situation where her and Khan were tangled in the sheets, you know? And I guess like you could look at that as more of a desire versus this is something that happened in a past life. Mm-hmm. But for me, it felt kind of strange because it was always set apart in the text. It was always italicized. Yes. So I was like, is this a memory? Is this a dream? I just hit our microphone. Sorry. But it really made me think there's some sort of connection between Rave and Khan. And then Khan reveals that he had a relationship with Elwyn while simultaneously also feeling something for Rave. So in my mind, I guess I just thought, well, if you loved Elwyn so much, he talks about this at the end of chapter 32 on their way to Dom.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's how we say that. The burn capital, where he tells Rave, I had been mourning someone I loved very much. Her name was Elwyn, and she died. He made it seem like he really had these big feelings for her. So I thought that there must be some sort of connection between how he's feeling for Rave and how he's feeling for Elwyn. And then at the end of chapter 35, at Khan's mother's house, in the middle of the night when Rave goes downstairs to kind of get it on with Khan, he tells her that he doesn't want a meaningless release. He says that she's not going to find that with him. And he gets very like upset and angry about it. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, all of these clues led me to believe that Khan feels something for her, but it's not physical. Uh-huh. And he admits that he's only really ever felt that for one other person, and that was Elwyn. Yeah. And somehow, in my mind, I was like, they're the same person.
Yeah. I also noticed all those same things in terms of, like, clearly, like, Rave and Khan used to have a relationship. Yeah. I, at one point, I think, did write down that I theorized that maybe they had a relationship and Rave doesn't know. Basically, I feel like I thought the same thing. I walked up to the line, but I just was like...
But you were like, no, that
Elwyn,
can't be.
Yeah, no. That part, no.
Impossible.
Yeah. But everything else, clearly they have a history and Rave just doesn't remember it.
Yes.
That I do agree with.
Yeah.
And obviously, yeah, that's how it ended up playing out. There were so many moments like that where it was so obvious that, you know, Khan had such strong feelings for Rave, and Rave is just like, God, it's going to be so awkward when I have to kill him.
When I have to kill him? Yeah.
It's just like, after a while, it's like, girl... He is doing so much for you. Do you want to back off just a little bit?
I do love how eventually she gets to the point where she's like, I guess I could let him live.
Yeah. I also want to get your thoughts on the other, because I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay, yes. What are your thoughts?
So, my theory is, sorry, I'm so excited about this because... I read the book once and then I skimmed through it twice to pick up on all these little clues. Okay. Because I firmly believe that the other is Slatra. Now, how? don't have anything for that.
Okay, love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Can't explain it. I assume that's a book 2 problem. But I have a lot of evidence. Let's just start from the beginning, right? Whenever Sareem meets Rave, she talks about their first interaction was like in the Undercity, and Rave apparently was like going off on people clearly in her other state. She had described Rave as having black glittery eyes and canines bared. At first, when you think about Cilatra, when she went through the burn, her eyes got damaged, and at that point they were described as milky. But I went back and also saw in earlier Eowyn diary entries that actually they were black and glittery. I did reread the first chapter we got from the other. She referred to herself as a she, that was her pronoun, and then the inky eyes and a lot of prowling descriptions, kind of animalistic type descriptions. The one thing that I feel like is a definite point towards this is definitely Cilatra is when Rave goes and talks to Vroon, the owner of the Curly Q in Dom.
Okay.
He starts saying, "You're missing something, but you don't know what. Something so special. The answer is within you, in the place where you hide everything. I can help you drain the..." And then Rave cuts him off. She's like, "Just continue with picking up my stuff. Like, I don't want to talk about this anymore." Mm-hmm. And so he's like, "Okay, let me go get your decoy purchases." He comes back with a journal with a moon plume on it.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I do remember that.
And I feel like that is his way of signaling,
Like a sign, like, hey.
Yes, like, you're not willing to accept it, but here's kind of what I'm talking about. After that, there's not really a whole lot of mention until we get the last other chapter, and then we get a lot of description. She says that the other understands loss, death, and pain differently from Rave. She also calls Rave a hatchling. When Rex says, "You're dead," she says, strictly speaking, he's not incorrect. She also says she sways towards the fire with animalistic grace, referring to how Rex protected Lyri's eyes, Lyri being the other moon plume that he rode into Dom on and did not protect her from the sun. The other says, "A small mercy that was not bestowed upon herself many cycles ago."
Oh, I must have missed that.
Yeah. She also says to Rex at one point, "Though you may not have understood Lyri's pain sounds, I did. I'm here to show you exactly how she felt." And then the last line she says in that chapter, I think, is, "Do you know how it feels for a moon plume to scald in the sun's harsh rays? A bit like this." And then she scalds him with the, like, poker or whatever. So that is all my support for Cilatra being the other. Again, I don't fucking understand how.
Yes, I could be convinced. I also don't know how, but I could be convinced.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't really give this that much thought. I really was like, the other, probably Eowyn, because Rave is Eowyn and Eowyn is Rave. They're the same person, so the other is clearly Eowyn.
Yeah.
Based off of vibes and vibes alone.
I feel like that last one, because there's so much specific references to Lyri, whatever her name is.
Yes.
I feel like that's where it was really
see that,
wait a second.
I see that for sure now that you are saying all of this. I did not give it much of a thought, but I could be convinced. Speaking of Rexxaros and kind of the other chapter, how did you feel about his death scene, or just him in general?
I actually do have a few thoughts about Rex, because honestly, when we first get introduced to him, I think it's reasonable that we could have thought he's just a guy doing his job. Yes, he is hunting Rave, but
Yes.
he's he's
a bounty hunter.
This is just his job. He doesn't know her. He probably doesn't care what necessarily what he's done.
It's just business.
Yeah, it's business.
Yeah.
I thought it was really funny just in general throughout the book that anytime Rave started to come anywhere near thinking about her past, or anything that made her slightly uncomfortable, she's like, "I just need to kill Rex."
Throughout the entire book, there was so much, I need to find Rexxaros.
Yes, I need to kill him. That is what I meant to do.
This is my purpose in life. She really turned it into, like, her life's mission.
Yeah, and I did think it was really satisfying that this book did end with his death.
It had to.
Yeah.
It had to end that way with Rave just constantly, "I have to kill Rexxaros. I have to kill Rexxaros."
I love that he ended up coming to Dom, so that way it was like, oh no, he's here. Obviously, once he arrived in Dom, it was like, okay, he actually is a jerk.
Yeah.
Especially his point of view. The fact that he was already thinking about killing the guy that carried him on his dragon so that way he could take his dragon and all this stuff. We'll say in Rex's favor, he said nothing better than a hot meal and a good show to get you in the mood for eating pussy and spilling blood. I'm like, well, at least he eats pussy.
Oh my gosh.
So he gets 1 point.
Like, he's really just out here being a man, you know?
Yes. He is the epitome of just, like...
Male.
toxic masculinity. The way that he talks about Kaisari, too. She runs because she knows I love the chase. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why do you think this has anything to do with you?
Yes.
Wreck sucked.
Rek is definitely a character in his own league. I choose Kalis over Rek any day.
Okay, but we still don't know if Kalis is good or bad.
Okay, what are your thoughts on Kalis? Let's run through this. I have a lot.
I really don't know. I could see it really going either way. The description that we get from the perspective of the other creators is that Kalis is jealous and basically a lot of negative things. They blame him for the moons falling out of the sky. But we only get their perspective. So I could really see it going either way, that it's like, yeah, they're right.
Or he's misunderstood.
It's an option. I would like to believe that he is misunderstood, honestly.
I think I do. I can fix him.
You can fix him. Girl, you know like 3 sentences worth of this man, and you're like,
and I'm hooked.
I will die on this hill. I get it, Kaisari.
Listen, is Kalis good? Is Kalis bad? It really could go either way. The creators in the prologue are very adamant that Kalis is a manipulative being. That it's his fault, all of this stuff is happening, the moons are falling, and all of this chaos is happening, and that's why they have to create the Ether Stone. But it's also only from their perspective. Kalis was there before any of them were there. Maybe he's like, I opened up my home to you.
From the beginning, they said that like he was lonely, and so he allowed for the other creators to come in.
Yeah.
And do their thing.
He just wanted friendship.
Yeah. What if he wasn't ever jealous? Not in like a vindictive way.
Yeah.
It's just like, I wish I had the same ability as them.
Yes. And then also on top of that, maybe because there really isn't that much we understand about Kalis's ability, at least on my end. I don't know if you feel like you understand it more.
No.
But I mean, the other creators are a little bit more self-explanatory, right? They're like elementals. They have elemental powers. But Kalis is just this void, this like space.
Yeah.
So I think it's also possible that he didn't know the weight of his power. Maybe all of these creators coming into his space affected his power a lot more than he thought it would. Maybe he just is misunderstood. He didn't mean to make the moons fall out of the sky. Yeah. I really think at the end of the day, there has to be something that Kaisari knows about Kalis that we don't. I feel like her admitting to Khan that, you know, she's in love with him, there has to be something that he said or did that made her believe that he's someone worth saving. And could that have been manipulative? Sure. I think he's misunderstood. And I'm ready to get into it in book 2.
I think I'm leaning more towards that he's misunderstood.
Either way, Kaisari knows something that she's not telling us.
Yes, because I will point out this line. Khan says, I know he's in that thing for a reason, that your family line was blessed with the power to contain him for a reason. And then Kaisari looks guilty. That's the description that's given. And he says, what do you know? She goes, nothing. And then that's kind of around when she leaves. The implication from Khan's perspective is that there's some piece of knowledge that she's hiding. I'm super curious about that storyline and where that's gonna go.
Speaking of hiding something, Kaisari being Khan and Eluin / Rave's daughter being hidden from literally everybody in that small little family?
Yes. I was so blown away.
Same. I did not consider that even.
Yeah. It makes it very interesting when you think about the whole fate herder. Does this really mean that Kaisari and Kalis are like going to help Tether? Or maybe not Kalis, but like if the fate herder was supposed to help whoever they were hurting to eventually have offspring that were going to help tether the moons to the sky, is Kaisari that offspring? I'm still obsessed with that revelation.
Yeah, it really was a revelation. And looking back on it, it's something that I thought maybe I should have considered at some point, because obviously we know that Khan and Eluin had relations.
Yes.
So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. I think I just assumed that like, oh, she married someone else and it's public knowledge that Kaisari is Tyros' daughter. But no.
No.
And what does that mean moving forward if/when Khan finds out? Right? And if/when Rave finds out.
Yeah.
If/when Kaisari finds out.
When anyone finds out, because right now the only person who actively knows is Vaya. So that is going to be really interesting, because now that's a whole thing on her shoulders. Like, what is she going to do with that information?
Book 2, baby.
Book 2. Everything is book 2. You know, this story is really interesting because even though it's a fantasy, it's really an epic romance between these two characters. Sometimes I would sort of take a step back and be like, but why is Khan so obsessed with Rave if Rave is not Elowen? I wonder what that would be like to say, have someone in front of you that it's like you loved them, but they don't remember you and they don't trust you. And for those reasons, they aren't really exactly the same person around you.
Yeah.
Not to mention the whole 23 years prior to that, where she went through being a firelark and all that stuff, and like clearly that shaped her into how she acts now. So anytime I would take a step back, it's like, Han, like, are you sure you like her? Or are you just like really determined? Like, do you love the idea of her being Elowen?
I think it must be something along those lines because Elowen was so ripped away from him.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, it was her choice, right? Because she chose to leave him to protect their unborn daughter.
Yeah.
And marry Tyroth, move back to the Shade, all of that. But I think because it felt so sudden for him on his part to have even this option of her being alive, I think that's what he's holding on to.
Yeah. Yeah, I do really love, I don't know if I have the line. This is after he shows her Slaughter's moon. He's like, go off and follow your bloodlust, and I hope that it brings you the same satisfaction that it does me knowing that you're alive, that you exist, or something like that. And it's just like,
how come it's always, I love you, and never, I have so much satisfaction knowing you're alive?
yeah! That line really killed me.
Yes.
And it is really beautiful the way that Rave really ends up over time letting down those barriers. She can see the past that she had with Khan, even though there's a little bit of conflict there, because it's like, I'm not Elowen, though.
Yes.
Like, I can't really have that exactly, but she does eventually allow for herself to have at least something. And I don't think she's fully there, but I love that she's on that trajectory to accepting that truth.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I really love the romance. So not only do we get one family surprise with Kaisari, but we also get another in the Scavenger King. So,
yes.
Do you want to talk about that? Because I know you got some feelings.
Honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, Carly. I completely forgot about that. I remember reading it and thinking, that's kind of out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I think I was just so focused on like everything else that was going on in the book that it felt like an afterthought. But now that you bring it up, I do have a lot of thoughts about this. And I will say, I think this is one of the main reasons, and I think I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the podcast. It's one of the main reasons that I gave this book a lower score versus a higher score, despite still enjoying the story and enjoying the world. I think this falls under plot holes, loose ends, things that don't really make sense because I hated it. If I'm being honest, putting it out there, wrong. No, I hated it. I hated every single part of it. And not just the fact that Sarah A. Parker brings up this half-brother out of nowhere, but just the fact that I don't believe that there needed to be an epilogue in this book at all. Yeah. The story is over. And I think she did this for the shock factor.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
I think she did this to bring readers back in for the second book that she's been planning to release this whole time. Because if it really mattered, then she would have written this character into the book.
It kind of just read weird because he's like, and actually they don't know that I am the secret half-brother. It just was kind of like a weird info drop.
Such an afterthought.
In my mind, because Kaisari is here, and it feels like the most important aspect in terms of this story is that we find out that Kaisari is the one who wrote Ni.
Yes.
And I do love that we get that resolution.
Yes.
For that reason, I think it would have been interesting if this actually was an epilogue from Kaisari's point of view. I don't think we needed to know that he's related
We didn't need this.
Bigger family.
We didn't need this. And if she had wanted to do this, if Sarah A. Parker had wanted to do this is a second book thing.
Yeah.
This shouldn't have been an epilogue because we should have had the time to analyze the imprisonment of Kaisari and to analyze what it means for her to be in the same pits that Rave, who we now know is her mother, was in and like made a name for herself in and escaped.
Yeah.
You know, that would have been more pertinent information to put in an epilogue if Sarah A. Parker really wanted to have an epilogue, not this whole half-brother business.
Yeah, this would have been really interesting to find out through the process of book 2.
Yes.
At first it's like, who is he? And then it's like, oh, he's the Firelight guy. Okay, that's bad. And then, hello, second reveal, he's actually a secret beggar and thinks he has a claim on Khan's crown. Like, oh shit. That just seems like a whole lot of book plot that could have been used and we're just slapping it
and
here
we're just,
in an epilogue.
just like as an afterthought, really just just like something, oh yeah, I'm just gonna put this in here.
This is not exactly what I care about. What I care more about is how did Rave end up in the pits? How did Kaisari end up in the pits? I don't care about who this guy is. Same thing with like, okay, cool, we found out that Rave and Elowen are the same person. How is that fucking possible?
Yes.
How is it possible that she died and went up into a moon and now she's back here on Earth because that moon fell? I understand that it is book one, but again, I do feel like when you spend 700 pages, you kind of hope for
instead
more
of
information.
Bringing more unanswered plot points into the book, she could have focused more on resolving the ones that she had already brought in to begin with.
The pacing of the loose ends is just not great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an author, but
but you are a reader.
But I am a reader.
So,
and I don't love when by the end of a book I feel really dumb.
Half-brother things aside, now that we're talking about character backstories and backgrounds, I want us to kind of touch a little bit on the Jokul clan and the Fate Herder scene. I really want to get into it because I think of all of the descriptions that Sarah A. Parker puts into her books, this was one of her better ones.
Yeah.
Like the culture, the traditions, the people. I don't know how you felt about it.
This was easily the most exciting part of the book and the most action and the most insanity. With every passing moment, it just gets crazier and crazier. Like, why did that Kulk have to die?
Yeah.
Why do we have to wear its blood?
Yeah.
All of their values were so different, but also at the same time, I guess you could argue that maybe they weren't most accommodating for the difference in values, but I did like the part where Brave is showing that she is not happy with it.
She's not about it.
And she's kind of like, I don't understand. Are you not happy with these options? So you're going to have a man and then you will have offspring. Okay, but I don't just want a random ass guy.
Yeah.
So Rave says something, fights back in her own way. And then Seiza says, I understand. We cradle different values. I apologize for overstepping. And I was like, how easy was that?
It was very mature.
Yes. And I feel like that's how a lot of people should handle their differences in value.
Yes.
It's like, I'm sorry. This is what matters to me, but clearly it doesn't matter to you.
Right.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking on that, I do think that obviously their cultures were very different, not just to what Rave was used to, but I think what we're used to in the world that we live in. I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about where Sarah A. Parker was coming from when she wrote the Jokul clan as a whole, as to like what research she did, what inspiration she took to create this whole new group and organization in her own book. Because they do have their own customs, they do have their own traditions, and they have their own hierarchy, which I guess Rave is kind of a part of, like we were talking about. She's the Kulu, and I don't know if I'm saying that right either, but the one whose offspring will tether the moons to the sky forever. And Khan is also a part of that hierarchy. As a child, he spent time with the Jokul clan, so he has all of this experience with them and all of these Reiki, if that's how you pronounce that. The dots on his back to show all of the victories that he's won. So there's a lot going on there with the Jokul clan and their background.
I do really want to talk about the Fate Herder aspect of it. Love the Fate Herder. Such a fun little lot tool. This is just what's supposed to happen, guys.
Yeah.
Like, the animal said it, and he's going to be mad if you try to go against it. Yeah, it is what it is, my man. I do think it's really interesting that the implication, according to this prophecy, is that the Fate Herder is going to bring Kolu to this tribe, and that Kolu is going to produce offspring that will tether the moons to the sky. It's really interesting to think about what exactly the purpose of the Fate Herder is, in the context knowing that Kaisari is actually Khan and Rave's daughter. Like, is the Fate Herder actually kind of just bringing her here so that way Khan can more easily find her? Is it sort of a commentary on how they're meant to be together, playing into the epic love story that they have going on? But then once you know about Kaisari, is Kaisari actually the offspring that is going to fulfill this prophecy? That's where I do kind of have a theory that if in the case that the Fate Herder is here to affirm that Kaisari is going to tether the moons to the sky, I think that Kaisari is going to successfully free Kalis, and I think it will kill her, but they'll go up into the sky together to be happy and thus ensuring that the moons stay in place.
I see.
Maybe the reason why the moons were falling, maybe the emotions are kind of causing the moons to fall because he's a little upset.
Okay.
And so if he's happy with his Kaisari, then maybe everything will be fine.
I do like this idea of Kaisari and Kalis being up there in the sky together in this empty space. I do think it plays into this like epic romantasy that Sarah A. Parker has given us, especially with like what we talked about with Khan and Rave/Elowen really being, you know, all these romantic moments, mostly from Khan's side because he's the one with all of these memories.
Yes.
But all of these romantic memories that he's kind of, pushing on her. I think the concept of the Fate Herder on the Khan, Rave / Elwyn side was more to bring them back together, not because they hadn't already been together, but to be together for Kaisari's sake, because they don't know yet about their whole little family and their relationship with each other, and neither does Kaisari. And I do think that Kaisari is meant to play a more important role, but I think she needs the support of her parents, because we know that Tyroth is not a very supportive father to her.
Yeah.
So I do think that she needs Khan and Rave / Elwyn to not only be there to help guide her through this, but also maybe just give her the support that she needs as like relative. She's just a girl. She needs this support to grow into.
She needs her mom.
She needs her mom. She needs her mom.
Don't we all?
And I do think that was more where I was going as like the purpose of the Fate Herder in this specific aspect. With thinking about what the Fate Herder is meant to do in this book, the plot device that the Fate Herder is meant to serve, I didn't love it, because I am very much like things need to happen because that's how it was shown in the context of the book, versus, oh, it happened because the Fate Herder said so.
Yeah, like it's kind of a cop-out.
Yes, I don't love how it kind of feels like, oh, well, the Fate Herder said so, so it must be true.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, but I also find it hilarious. It's like, literally, it's a cop-out that you wrote into the book.
Yes. But I am interested to see how moving forward, because I do think the Fate Herder, the purpose here was to bring Khan and Rave / Elwyn together. So I am interested to see how that continues to evolve, especially with the theory of Kaisari and Kalis and how that's supposed to move forward in the later books.
I think that covers all of our big ticket items, but there were a couple of little things that I want to talk about. First of all, being Roan. Do you even remember who Roan is in this book?
I feel like Roan was one of the court members of Khan in the Burn City.
Correct.
Right?
He is. He's also Pyrock's brother.
I even needed a second to remember who Pyrock was. Do I even know who any of the characters are?
Anyone outside of Rave and Khan, it's like, who cares?
Who?
Maybe they, Roan only got 2 mentions, but I was just like, this feels significant. I do feel like this is very much a planting seeds for future books.
It does feel strange why mention him.
Yeah, the mention that we got, this is right when Rave and Khan come back to Dom after she experiences her injury at the end of the Joku clan situation, and at some point, Khan asks Pyrock, what's Roan up to? Where is he? And Pyrock says, trying to get a look at that book again. He's certain there are more pages that haven't been transcribed and released to the public. At first, I was like, what is this book? But then I realized what it probably is referring to is the book that the Roonies read that supposedly Kalis wrote, or like is in his language. Like that is what the Roonies' magic is tied to, is that they are able to read this book of Kalis's language.
I don't even remember any of this.
That's where it comes from. That is just kind of strange to me, and I feel like that must be what it relates to, even if maybe the description of it isn't super consistent with my understanding. But also, I feel like we don't get a whole lot of description of how the Roonies stuff works, other than like the buttons indicating what they can do.
Yes.
And it's like, cool, got that.
Yeah.
And then
book 2.
Yes, book 2. And then Roan is mentioned again after he comes back after 30 days. And he asks Pyrock again about Roan, and he is still not here. I am worried about Roan. 30 days, and he's just
book
like...
2.
Book 2. What if he... I don't know. I'm just like, hopefully he's alive. Because there are little things here and there where, like, it mentions of people that it's like, God, I hope they're even alive. Like, like the queen who stopped Rave's execution...
Yes.
It's mentioned that, like, oh, she used to help smuggle people out of the Fade or Fade. It was the Fade. And
hope she's still alive.
And it was just like, that hasn't happened, though, ever since she tried to stop that one execution. And it's just like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Like, would these people kill their own wives? Probably.
Probably.
I did also want to bring up that I really enjoyed Lyrai, the dragon at the end. I just wanted to say that I really liked their relationship, and I liked that it felt like this was really the thing that sort of cracked into, like, Rave kind of willing to dig into that ice lake and sort of confront some of her past, because she talks to her and is like, you know, I've been burned too. I know what it's like, and all these sort of things. And it's just like, it was so nice to finally see a full circle moment that the one thing that's going to get her to finally come out of her shell and maybe confront a little bit of her past is another dragon.
I agree. I really enjoyed that. And I also enjoyed this idea of her getting a dragon, you know, especially with everything that happened with Slatra and Elowin, that now we get to see Rave, who has been adamant this whole time she's not Elowin, right? We get to see her have a dragon of her own and kind of be her own person and kind of figure out this whole life that we've seen Elowin figure out, and kind of see how this plays into Rave and who she is as a new and different person.
Yeah. Scrippy, I think that the only reason why we get so many stupid creatures that like never come up ever again is so we can have Scrippy.
I think it might be possible if we go back through this book. I think it might be possible for us to play this game.
We can try. I'm not the most gung-ho about it.
Maybe in another episode.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Especially book 2. Find out more information. Surely they're going to play more Scrippy.
Book 2. I think there's potential for us to actually be able to play this game. And I think there's a lot of potential for Sarah A. Parker to release this as merchandise. Like, imagine, you know, she comes up with a full rule book, actually comes up with cards, gets them really, like, artistically, like, well-designed. There's a lot that can happen here. Sarah A. Parker.
Yeah, please.
There's a lot that can happen here.
Yeah. The last little thing I wanted to talk about is Vea's bangle. I feel like there's a lot of information about this bangle is gonna come up later, because she said that she's certain that it had something to do with the reason that she had a blank spot the size of 30 Aurora cycles smudged in her mind. And
30 Aurora cycles.
Yeah. So now that we know that one of the powers that the bangle has is shape-shifting of some sort, I wonder if the reason why she has this spot of lost memories is if when you shape-shift into another person, you kind of lose it because you're not you.
She has the other.
She has the other.
She has
but
her own the other.
But it's intentional. And she shows it. Even when she's going to get the bangle, there's a little bit of an air of like, I think I know what it does, but like, she doesn't seem to have memories
She's not
of even
entirely
using
sure.
it.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that might explain that little part of it, but also part of me is like, surely we aren't going to gloss over that. Like,
yes,
there's going to be an explanation there.
No, definitely. Yeah, I definitely think there will be. And I mean, honestly, now that we're talking about all of these little things, like, it really goes back into what we were saying about like loose ends too. There's a lot of information in this book that surely we have to get back to in book 2.
Yeah. And most important loose end, in my opinion, where is Rook?
Where is Rook? Justice for Rook.
Justice for Rook. I adored this little weird creature man that I pictured as the most horrible CGI, like Sonic the Hedgehog levels of OG Sonic from before they fixed it. Levels of bad CGI, like kind of a human-y face, but then everything else is like an animal. But I love him, and
I loved him.
He was so endearing. And yeah, I just think it's weird that there's just no mention of him ever again. Like, I just thought surely by page 600 we would hear about.
I mean, that he
Rook
would be brought up in such a pivotal point in the book, and then to be never heard of or seen again.
Yeah, just a name drop.
Just something.
Something for my boy.
Something.
Yeah.
There is a second book slated for the end of this year, so maybe we'll get all of our answers then.
And I sure hope so, because I need answers.
You know what I need, Carly?
What?
I need to know what our next book is.
Well, let me tell you, this is a book I need us to talk about, Sam. We are going to be covering the highly anticipated third book in the Empyrean series, Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. And I think this book's reputation speaks for itself. If you're into battle briefs, betrayals, and shadow-wielding book boyfriends, then this book series is for you.
Our Onyx Storm Book Club episode comes out Tuesday, March 25th, but we do have another episode, an off-the-shelf episode, coming out Tuesday, March 11th, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening to the first full episode of our soon-to-be-hit podcast, Read Receipts with Carly and Sam. All of the content that you hear in this podcast is curated, recorded, and edited by us truly, with special thanks to the authors of the books that we cover and picks Pixabay for the music that we play. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you like to listen. And for more of our content in between shows, you can follow us at the Read Receipts Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We read all of your comments and we love all of your likes, so please, please, please follow along. Until our next read, bye!